Wait, so now you're telling me I gotta worry about a murder hornet? Hi, thanks for watching. Today I want to talk about the story of the murder hornet. You've heard about this because it's gone nationwide. It was published over the weekend at the New York Times, and since then there have been countless stories in every publication. I was driving to the grocery store the other day. I heard it in my car on the local radio station. They were talking about the murder hornet. And why didn't we hear about this before? Why are we only hearing about this now? Is this real or is it hype? Well, let's get into that. First, I want to talk about the original story that was published at the New York Times over the weekend. So here's what we saw. Murder hornets in the U.S. The rush to stop the Asian giant hornet. Sightings of the Asian giant hornet have prompted fears that the vicious insect could establish itself in the United States and devastate bee populations. And we've got a picture here. It's actually a dead one on this guy's shirt. And this was published May 2nd. And we can go through and read about it. In his decades of beekeeping, Ted McFall has never seen anything like it. And we can read paragraph after paragraph after paragraph and go through this entire thing and not even get to the real important parts of this story, which I'm going to tell you about in just a second. But you read about this and it's really scary about this murder hornet. But I was a little suspicious. You see, they talked about this same hornet in December of last year, and there wasn't quite as much hype about it. Back then, it was just called an Asian giant hornet. Invasion threatens honeybees in the Pacific Northwest. This was December of last year. And it's a story about what was possible. They talked about this hornet and what was possible. Well, my question is, first, why is it called a murder hornet? Well, that's because the author of the latest piece said that some people called it a murder hornet. Well, if we can just take what some people say and throw it in a headline, to get a little extra clicks, I would say that this author, or some people say paid liar at the New York Times, has to say. Some people do call him a paid liar. And so perhaps we should just refer to people that write for the New York Times as paid liars, because some people say that. This is not a murder hornet. That's not the name of this thing. It is technically, right? It is called an Asian giant hornet. But this is what the New York Times does. In fact, I've talked many times about how people don't actually read the whole story. They just read the headline. Well, at the New York Times, they have something, for example, that they do. You don't even read the story. They sum it up for you. This is your daily briefing. Everything you need to know. Well, let's find out what's everything we need to know about the murder hornet. So if we go down here, it's story number 2. The murder hornet arrives in the U.S. Now that's a present tense, okay? Present tense. Scientists and beekeepers are racing to control the spread of the Asian giant hornet, a vicious species that decapitates bees with its mandibles and could devastate bee populations. In Japan, the hornets kill up to 50 people each year being stung by one. A scientist told the Times, "Felt like having red-hot thumbtacks driven into my flesh." And that's it. That's what you get for your daily briefing from the New York Times. It's all you need to know, right? Here's what you need to know. And they've talked about the murder hornet. They're racing to control the spread of it. present tense. Well, that's not exactly entirely accurate. And why this is especially important to me is I saw this story and I got a little freaked out because I am allergic to bees. I don't know bees technically, but wasps and hornets. I'm definitely allergic. In fact, here's a picture from 2 years ago. I'll put that on the screen, where my hand is the size of a catcher's mitt, where I went to the hospital when I was stung. I have these silly things. I got about a dozen of these surrounding my house. This one I have to put in some more water and some trap, some whatever it's called. And here's an epi-pen that I'm supposed to take anytime I go hiking or anything like that. In case I get stung, I got to carry around this $600 epi-pen, to make sure I don't die. So when I saw this murder hornets thing, I kind of freaked out a little bit. And I decided to actually not go to the New York Times because they're known paid liars. So I checked out something from Entomology and Nematology News. And so here we are. The subtitle is about those Asian giant hornets, aka murder hornets. And this is by Kathy Keatley Garvey. And this was published Monday. It's ridiculous to call the Asian giant hornet, recently found in British Columbia and Washington State, the murder hornets, says the noted UC Davis wasp expert and researcher, Lynn Kimsey, director of the Bohart Museum of Etymology and professor of entomology, UC Davis Department of Entomology and Nematology. It's no more likely to sting and kill a human than a honeybee, said Kimsey, a two-term past president of the International Society of, I'm not even going to try that word, an organization that studies bees, wasps, ants, and sawflies. I wonder why this person was not consulted for the New York Times story. Well, I think we know why. Actually, it's less likely, as honeybee venom packs quite a punch, and it is exclusively designed to defend against vertebrates, she said. The colony everyone is hyperventilating over was actually found on Vancouver Island, British Columbia, last September, when it was destroyed, and then a single dead hornet was found in December in Blaine, Washington. Kimsey said, "There's no evidence that there are any more hornets in the vicinity of Vancouver or anywhere else on the West Coast." Well, this is like the important part of the story. There haven't been any hornets of this variety seen in North America in 2020. That wasn't even mentioned in the original New York Times article. Meanwhile, entomologists are bemoaning the name murder hornet and the sensationalism and fear-mongering ensuing. "It's a bloody dumpster fire," said entomology enthusiast, photographer, and tour guide Stephanie DeGrief, administrator of the newly created Facebook page, "Is This a Murder Hornet?" Some poorly worded media reports about Asian giant hornets have triggered a veritable avalanche of nonsense online, but I can set the record straight. One colony was found and exterminated in Vancouver Island in September of 2019, with a few sightings associated. One wasp, believed to be from that colony, was found dead on the U.S. side. Right now, all the authorities are doing is asking people to keep their eyes peeled just in case there were queens that escaped the destruction of that nest and established their own nests nearby. I was one of the authorities brought in to consult on the case, and to my knowledge, there have not been any sightings in 2020 that would suggest the eradication attempt was unsuccessful. Put bluntly, as far as we know, there are no Asian giant hornets alive in either the US or Canada as of 2020. Unbelievable. And This is typical. This is typical of the New York Times, because honest reporting doesn't get clicks, doesn't get shares. But to take something that happened last year, repurpose it by giving it a flashy name like murder hornets, and that gets everybody freaked out. And I think that this is especially rotten to do. In times like this, we don't need more fear. We don't need to be selling more fear to everyone. But that's exactly what the New York Times did. They're selling fear. And in that original article, they didn't even say they haven't seen a single one of these in 2020. Unbelievable. And my question to you is, how many times does the New York Times need to lie to its audience for its audience to decide they're not really that trustworthy? Now, I've pointed out many times that the New York Times has exaggerated and pushed fear or just straight up lies. But yet, most people that I know, they still read the New York Times. They get the Sunday edition. That's part of their life. And it's like they don't want to know this. They just close their ears, close their eyes, and go along with that narrative. One thing that is important to note about the media is they get to decide what's important. They get to decide what people talk about. This murder hornet story is a perfect example of this. They decided to push this out over the weekend, and it's gone viral. Congratulations, they got lots of clicks. They're making money on advertising for it, and they've been selling fear to everyone in this country over something that doesn't exist. Shameful. It's shameful. But I'm relieved that there are not murder hornets coming for me. I was scared. But once again, if you read the entire article or you do a little extra research, you find out that the New York Times is nothing but paid liars. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Peace.